Why, welcome everyone. Welcome to PlayFrame and to Final Fantasy XIV and this bonus intermission video, another one. Over the course of this series, looking at the comment section, I've noticed that some folks have had a little bit of difficulty understanding what is going on in combat situations, especially once we get into dungeons where there's a lot more players and there's just a whole fireworks show going on. Who can even tell what's happening? Wow, it really got foggy out here real fast. Who can even tell what's happening in those situations? So what I want to do today is go over some basics, just some real basic 101 level combat stuff so that folks can understand a little better what's going on, especially the folks who've not played MMORPGs before. If you're just here for story, feel free to skip to the next video in the playlist. We'll be back to story tomorrow. But for the rest of you, I thought this might help. Now, I should also mention this is going to be a very basic overview. There are far more robust and reliable sources out there if you want to really learn the ins and outs of Final Fantasy XIV's mechanics and strategy and all that stuff. This is for those of you who just want to have a little better grounding in how combat works and what all the nonsense is on screen and what on earth Durmin and his comrades are doing at any given moment. So here's a crash course, starting with this here is the basic HUD, as you will see it when you first log into the game, probably minus a few abilities, but this is the default HUD layout for Final Fantasy XIV. A little different from what I usually go with, but I figured this would be easiest for showing things off. Let's just go through the elements one by one so folks can understand each bit. And by the way, if there's any given section of this that you're wanting to skip, I will be timestamping this video throughout so you can skip to sections that are more relevant. Anyway, up here, you see the next main scenario quest. This little thing will basically show at all times what the next story quest you have to do is, which is quite nice, because say, like right now, I've not got a story quest accepted, so I don't know what my next objective should be, or even where to go find a quest giver. This will show you. Just click on it, and it will show you a location in the world on the map where that quest giver is. In this case, the Waking Sands. Go figure. What's more, if you have a job quest that you've not done, I'm a level 29 gladiator here with Durmin, and I've got a job quest I've not done yet, it'll show you that as well, just underneath it. I can click that, and it'll show me, oh hey, I've got a job quest that I can go do back in Ul'dah. Isn't that nice? And then you can just click on Aetherite if you want to warp right there. I don't right now, but you could. So that's that. This up here, these are some status effects. Specifically some status effects that are sort of little passive bonuses that I'm receiving right now, not anything really to do directly with combat. Like this right here is showing that I'm getting an experience boost just for joining a particular server that wasn't super full relatively when I started the game. Over here we have the mini-map, which is very helpful. You can see my little arrow moving around there. You can also see the current weather. Foggy. I mean, you could see that anyway, but it's nice being able to see a name for it. Let's see. Also, there's this stuff up here. This is showing what server we're currently in, curl. This is just other basic information about my connectivity. And here is the current time in Eorzea. Right now, it is 10, 15, 16, 17. Eorzea time goes faster than real time, obviously. It's the morning. You can also see other times, though. You can see the local time, which is 10:40 p.m., or server time. I don't really know why that would be super helpful, but if you want to see what time zone it is for the server you're in, there you go. I usually leave it on Eorzea time because I find that information more helpful at a glance. This is, you know what, don't worry about that one right now. This is a little miniature representation of your inventory. I saw some people asking about this, and I can understand why you'd wonder, like, what's with all the dots? So, if I hit the I key and I pull up my inventory, you can see here on this tab, this little tab here and the number of filled slots looks pretty similar to this one right here, right? And if we go to the second and third tab, empty, right? Empty. Fourth tab has a few things along the bottom. There you go. So that can show you how full your inventory currently is, which can be kind of helpful. This over here, these slots are showing my current equipment, showing that I've got stuff in all of those slots as well. I'm fully geared up. These can be kind of helpful to have in the corner of your eye now and then. They're not essential, but they can be useful. Also, we've got here basically a whole bunch of submenus. So let's say I click on this one. There's a lot of submenus in here that I could pull up. Let's say I wanted to look at my inventory without hitting the I key for some reason. I could click this and then click this. Boom. There's my inventory. Let's say I want to see my character screen. Instead of hitting C, I can click it there. And there's a whole bunch of different things in here. Just tons. Like, here's a character tab with a bunch of things. Duties, logs, travel stuff for forming parties with people, social stuff like emotes and housing and free company stuff, basic system things for settings, just lots of sub-menus in there that can be very helpful to have access to at any given time. You can see the amount of like currency I currently have here. Down here, we have my experience bar, which shows you not only what your current job and level are, but also how much experience you have to your next level, which you can also see represented by this yellow line slowly filling up here. Not too far away from 30. What else? Let's see, we've got our HP bar here. I run out of this number and I die. And my MP bar over here. Now that might seem like a lot of MP for a gladiator, physical, melee, non-mage class to have. It turns out every single job in the game has 10,000 MP, and they have that amount of MP for the entire game. It almost helps to think of it more as a percentage, actually. Like, think of this as like 100.00%. This is a resource that you're going to be using for a lot of different spells and abilities you have, and by having everyone always have the same consistent amount, it kind of simplifies their design for how much stuff costs and for balancing all those aspects. So, yeah, HP and MP. And here we have our hotbars. Now, normally they will look a little bit different from this. They'll probably look a little more something like there. Now you can see all the empty slots and the hotkeys that I need to hit to activate each one, even though you can just also perfectly fine click on them to use them, and many do. These are your hotbars where you can put a lot of your abilities for using in combat. But it is not just combat abilities that you can put here. You can put all kinds of stuff here. For instance, let's say there was an item in my inventory, like the resource that I use to summon Quayfriend. Maybe I want to have that easily accessible on my hotbar to where I can just click on it, and boom, Quayfriend. Oh, there you are, Quayfriend. So yeah, we can put inventory items down there. We can also put, let's say, there is a particular submenu that I really just want to have access to at all times. And for whatever reason, I want to be able to manually press another button to pull up my inventory instead of just hitting the I key, which is much easier. I can put the inventory thing right there, and there we go. And you can have a lot more than just these 2 rows of hotbars here. There's as many as 10 hotbars that you can have turned on and active and have stuff attached to if you want to. This whole interface is extremely customizable. In fact, let me show you that next. Because you could just go, if you hit escape, you'll pull up this menu here. You can hit HUD layout, and it will show you all of the different elements that you currently have or could have on your UI. See where like all these additional hotbars that I could be activating if I wanted to. There, we got a 3rd and 4th hotbar pulled up now. And it's really customizable. Let's say I want to have my mini-map down here. And let's say for some silly reason, I want it to be twice as big. Mega mini-map. You can do that. It's silly, but you can do it. Here is what my layout looks like normally. Like everything moved further down, a lot of elements pulled out because they're cluttery. Nice and clean, right? Nothing interfering with your view quite so much. But the default layout will look more like this, and that's fine. Also, up here, now that we have a party member, quote-unquote, in Quayfriend, here is where our list of party members will be. You can see their name, their level, their current, you can see their HP bar. You can also right now see how much longer I can keep Quayfriend summoned until I have to use another one of those resources. Also, if Quayfriend had MP, you would also be able to see their MP bar, and possibly even, I can't remember if you can see party members like casting progress bars or not. You can with enemies, maybe with party members too. I don't know. But yeah, that is basically everything on your HUD. Except for this, I guess I skipped over this one. This is a job-specific little bit of UI that shows, well, right now, all that it's showing is that I currently have my tank stance on. If I had it turned off, it would not be glowing. Now that seems like a silly thing to have a whole HUD thing for. As I level Gladiator up, there will be more additions to this little HUD element that will show more information, some resources that I'm building up and can spend to use on abilities and stuff like that. Every job in the game has some job-specific, unique HUD elements like this, which I usually move down here or somewhere less out of the way because this is just the most intrusive. I guess it's not the most intrusive possible place for a HUD element to be, but it's pretty intrusive. Also, as you can see when I turn that tank stance back on, here's where some of the other status effects I have will be going. Positive ones, I think, are all going to be showing up on this side of the screen by default anyway. I usually move them down here above my action bars on my regular layout, but here you can see Enmity is increased, which means that I have my tank stance on and enemies want to hit me more. I think that's about everything for the HUD, which I guess brings us to... I moved the tank stance thing down here because it was annoying me. Anyway, let's talk about combat because there's lots of stuff to go over. So, if you've never played an MMORPG before, the combat systems in these games generally work kind of similarly to something between a JRPG and a D&D system, but much more fast-paced and quick and real-time. If you've played Final Fantasy XII or Xenoblade Chronicles, it works very similarly to those games, except you can't pause, and since it's an MMO, you control one character instead of a party of them. But it's very similar to that. Basically, let's say I want to attack this Sabotender here. It's level 25, which we can see right there, which is nice. We can also see by that little blue symbol that I don't know what it is. It almost kind of looks like an alien head. I don't think that's what it is, but it means it's a non-aggressive thing. It means that I can just run right up around it. It's not going to pick a fight with me. It's super nice and cool. Most other enemies you'll see wandering around have varying shapes of yellow and red symbols over there. That means they are aggressive. If they see me and I'm anywhere within their level, they'll probably attack me. But these won't. Anyway, you'll notice also when I select them, I get their little health bar up here, which is very helpful. There will be some other helpful information up here as we get into a fight. If I right-click on them, I will engage in combat with them. I haven't hit them yet, so they're still not mad at me, but if I get close enough, like within range for my sword to reach, then I will, and combat will begin. Now you can see all their stuff has turned red, which means we've engaged with them. You also saw a little wispy line drawn from their head to mine with that little shing sound. That means that they are targeting me. And you can kind of see a lot on the UI here. You can see their health bar going down as I hit them. You can see that they are targeting me currently, that I am their target. You can also see a full list of all the enemies I'm currently fighting, which is 1. But there's some helpful information here. You can see their health bar. You can see that little red symbol, which means that they are maddest at me of everybody here, which means they're targeting me. You can see their name. You can also see their cast bar here and up here when they start using abilities. That's very helpful. See, he's using 100 needles, which is what that danger puddle was for, which is why I got out of the way. We'll talk more about danger puddles in a bit. Now, as you can see, we are kind of exchanging blows here. I am getting in a swing now and then. You'll see the amount of damage with each hit floating up. Anytime they hit me, you'll see like a little damage number drift down over here. And that's how combat goes. Now, I'm not hitting anything to keep on attacking them. Those auto attacks are just happening every couple of seconds, because that's just how it goes. And these auto attacks are not something that the enemy or I can like manually dodge. Like there's no point in me trying to like do evasive maneuvers around here to avoid their auto attacks. That's just how these games work. It's a passive bit of damage we are each doing to each other while we are in close proximity and engaged with each other. Although, like, each of these kind of has some dice rolls involved. Like, so I could, as you can see there, I parried some of the damage because I had a shield. There will be some times where I dodge a hit completely. Let's see if I do that anytime soon here. Nope. Don't want to be hit by that. That'll hurt a lot more. But yeah, try to hit me with something else. Come on. Durmin, dodge it. You did it. There we go. See, it didn't take any damage from that hit. So that's how auto attacks work. But as you can see, it's pretty slow paced trying to kill a thing this way. It's not a whole lot of damage. This is where you use abilities. Abilities are where you're going to be real. Let's get this off of this bar. We don't need the inventory and Gissel greens on the hotbar. Your abilities are how you are going to be doing most of your damage and most of your combat stuff. The auto attacks are just some passive additional damage that you're doing all the while. There are a lot of abilities in this game. Every single job in the game, and there are 17 jobs in the game as of this recording, every job in the game has an almost completely unique array of abilities, and a lot of them. Let me pull up my ability list right now for Gladiator. This is all the abilities I have right now, and there's 2 that I don't have yet, because I'm not level 38 or 50. As soon as this Gladiator turns into a Paladin, though, there's going to be a whole lot more abilities. Each job has dozens, really, between their active abilities and their sort of passive traits that they get. And they do all kinds of things. Some of them deal direct damage. Some of them will deal damage over time, like a poison spell, where like if you hit the enemy with it, that'll do a little bit of passive damage every few seconds for the next 30 seconds or so. There are some abilities that will heal you or protect you from damage. There are some that'll like move you like around somewhere quick or redirect the enemy, or that abilities do all kinds of wild stuff. And abilities are where most of the flavor and combat function for each of the jobs comes in, because they all handle differently. They've all got a completely different list of abilities, and it results in them all playing quite differently. These are what really set each job apart. Here, let me find an enemy that's not going to try to hit me with a danger puddle or something, because that'll make it a little bit easier to show this. So, okay, let's, for an example, look at some of the abilities we have here as a level 28 gladiator. Starting over here with the first ability we got at level 1, Fast Blade. You can see, as I scroll over this, you can see a lot of information in this tooltip. The skill name, you can see its range, 3 yalms. It's a close range attack. I gotta be pretty close to be able to use it. If I targeted this swarm right now and tried to use it, wouldn't work, not in range. Gotta get at least this close. Now I could use it. But let's see what else. You can see its cast time, instant. This ability will come out the instant I hit the button, and you can see its recast time, which is just a little under 2.5 seconds. So every 2.5 seconds I can use this. And you below that can see a description of what the ability does. Delivers an attack with a potency of 150. Potency basically means the ability's power. It doesn't necessarily mean the damage I would do. If I use this on the Wasp Swarm, I would not do 150 damage. The damage I do actually relies on a whole lot of variables. It relies on my level, which dictates my stats. It relies on the stats that my gear has and what boosts that might be giving me. It relies on the defense of the enemy and what their level is relative to mine, and what other passive abilities or buffs or status effects and other stuff they might have on them. There's a lot of different variables that come into play, including a little bit of RNG and dice rolling, dictating exactly what the damage will be. But potency is still very helpful for kind of knowing the relative strength of your different abilities. For example, this one has 150 potency worth of damage. If there was another attack that I had that delivered an attack with a potency of 300, that would essentially mean that ability is twice as strong as this one. So that can be very helpful for kind of measuring your damage output per second or minute or however you want to rate it. So let's see. I don't even have to initiate combat. I don't have to right-click first. I can just use the ability, and that will kick things off. There we go. See, just 55 damage from that ability right there. That's way more than the 22 I'm doing per passive attack swing. Now, if I use abilities, if I just use Fast Blade over and over, you'll still see the auto attacks still happening peppered in there. Those are happening consistently regardless of what else I'm doing. The abilities are just bonus damage on top of it, which is why you really should be spamming these things at enemies nonstop. They are your main true source of damage output. Now notice here, when I'm using Fast Blade, this second one, Riot Blade, highlights. And that is because Fast Blade and Riot Blade are part of a combo. Many of the jobs in the game have abilities that combo together that are meant to go one after another. Most of the melee jobs, I think all do. So for example here, if we look at the description for Riot Blade, a lot of it looks pretty similar to Fast Blade. 3 yalm range, instant cast, 2.5 second recast, delivers an attack with a potency of 100, which is actually weaker than Fast Blade, but further down you see combo action, Fast Blade, and combo potency, 230. So if I just use Riot Blade by itself, it's weaker than using Fast Blade. There's almost no point. But if I use Fast Blade first and then Riot Blade, then it's going to do 230 potency, which is way stronger. And then I could continue the combo to Rage of Halone, the third hit in this 3-hit combo that I currently have, which would deliver an attack in a combo of 330, the strongest hit of the bunch. So basically, when I enter combat, I got a lot of other abilities, but what I'm probably going to be spamming a lot of the time is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, basically as soon as the cooldown comes up. So, 1, 2, you can see bigger and bigger damage numbers, 3. Yeah, so that last hit, 124, way more than I've been doing with auto attacks or even with Fast Blade. So using combos like these are sort of the backbone of your rotation is the term. Rotation is a term that people use for the order of abilities they use in combat to put out optimal damage. Really, getting good at playing your job in Final Fantasy XIV is mostly down to learning what all of your abilities are, what they do, and trying to figure out how to strategically use them in a way to do the most damage per sec or healing or whatever per second that you can. And some people get very good at it. But let's see, what other sort of abilities do we have here that do other interesting things? We've got Shield Bash, which only does 100 potency damage, which is not super exciting, but its additional effect is Stun for 6 seconds, which can be very helpful. That could potentially interrupt the cast time of an ability on an enemy, meaning that they can't actually get it out and do damage to anyone. Or at the very least, it could stun them for a few seconds so they can't attack for a little bit, which is also nice. Let's see, we've got this other ability that I used before, Iron Will, which I can use every 10 seconds and basically just turns my tank stance on, lights up that little thing down there, and gives me the status effect showing that Enmity is increased so that enemies are more likely to want to attack me. We've got defensive abilities over here. Every 90 seconds, I can use this, and for the next 20 seconds, I will take 20% less damage, which is pretty great. Healers appreciate that a lot. If I'm getting hit by a bunch of things and I just throw that on there, meaning that I'm taking 20% less damage from everything, that makes their healing life way easier. They'll be very grateful. Or if I wanted to be doing more damage, every 60 seconds I can throw this on. And for the next 25 seconds, the damage I'm doing is increased by 25%. So my damage output is increased, and that's nice. And that's just a tiny little subset of the abilities that this job will eventually have access to, but you get the idea. Let's talk about a few other nuances of combat. Let's talk about, directionals. That's important. So you see when I select this enemy here, this ring below them. This is actually a very helpful tool for melee jobs especially, because it shows us which direction the enemy is facing, which on some enemy types is not always super clear. But they're facing that way. Why does that matter, you ask? Well, it matters because some jobs have abilities that do more damage if you attack the enemy from a specific side. I don't think the Gladiator has any, but some classes will have a thing that says does more potency damage if you attack from the flank. So if you need to attack from either side of them, or it does more damage if you attack from the rear. So having this ring here is a really helpful guide to seeing which direction the enemy's facing and where you need to be standing to be doing optimal damage. Let's see, what else? Aha, I know. Let's talk about danger puddles. So, danger puddles are essentially a representation of the enemies using their actions and abilities. Because they've got their auto attacks that are doing passive damage to whoever they're targeting. You can see, by the way, some of these symbols mean these enemies would definitely attack me if I got within visible range of them. Heck, let's get in the range of let's try to get in the range of 1. There we go. Okay, yep, they saw me. You saw the little orange whoosh as they targeted me. They are upset, and they're hitting me with their auto attacks, and they're a mage, so it looks all magic-y. Do you have an ability? You do. This one doesn't have a danger puddle, though. That's you just casting your thunder spells. Just quit it. Stop doing that. I don't think this enemy is going to have a danger puddle, but a lot of abilities that enemies have, their bigger attacks that are going to do more damage, are going to have probably a danger puddle of some form. Not all of them, but a lot of them do. Some folks were a little bit unclear as to how those danger puddles work. Like, how do you know you've gotten out of them in time? The basic rule is, most of the time, if you are still standing in it when it disappears, you are going to get hit. The danger puddle popping up is your warning that it's coming, and the puddle popping up, you will notice, like when I attack the Sabatender and it tries to use 100 needles on me, as soon as it starts casting it, you'll see the danger puddle pop up, you'll see the 100 needles cast bar start filling here, and as soon as it fills, the puddle will disappear, and then the attack will happen, and if I'm still standing in there, I'll get hit. So, to demonstrate. Show me those needles. Okay, and it appears, I move out of it, it disappears. I'm fine, it missed. This time, I'll stay in it until it disappears. And you'll notice that it does way more damage, relatively, than its basic attacks. So yeah, that did 100 HP worth of damage, which is way more than these occasional 25 HP hits it's doing. And there are varying shapes of danger puddles, as you've already seen. For some enemies, the danger puddle will be a cone in front of them, or a line in front of them, or maybe it'll be a circle that is centered around me and my current location rather than the enemies. Like there's all shapes and forms. And there's also a whole lot of different varieties of puddle in how they can function. Like out here, just in the regular world fighting basic enemies, the worst kind of danger puddle you're going to run into, they're all kind of similar to this. Just a little orange thing that pops up that you don't want to stand in, or else you'd take a lot more damage than normal. Once you get into like boss fights in dungeons and trials and raids and stuff, the varieties of danger puddle start increasing significantly. And you've already seen some of that. Like, remember the acid dragon we fought in Brave Flox's long stop that threw out a danger puddle, or actually there wasn't even a danger puddle. It just charged its poison goop spit ability, targeted one of us at random, and spit out a green puddle that stayed on the ground. And if we stood in that green puddle at any time, we would start taking poison damage. And if the dragon stood in the green poison puddle, it would actually heal itself. You start running into way more interesting mechanics like that. And in fact, I'm going to show you some footage from much further later in the game fights to show you, like, you're going to see some puddles that are way more complicated and look really different because they do different things. There's all kinds of wild mechanics that boss fights in this game start getting up to, and they're complicated, but really fun. That's what, like, combat starts getting really fun in those big party boss fights where the bosses are throwing all kinds of wild stuff at you and you got to think on your feet and be moving and trying to be doing as much damage as you can. It gets really fun. We'll get to all that fun stuff as the series goes on. I think there's a few other basic things we should probably go over real quick. Escaping. Let's say you get in a fight and you don't want to be in that fight anymore. The best thing to do is just run away, because most enemies are going to get tired of chasing you. They've kind of got an area that they prefer to stay in, and if you get too far out of that area, they'll eventually give up and leave. And their health will refill pretty much right away, and it'll be like it never happened. Now, let's talk about death. If I run out of HP, I will die. And what happens from there can vary based on context. If I'm out in the world, then I will fall down dead on the spot. And my two options are to either hope that somebody with the ability to revive people comes by, like a white mage or a healer or something, or I can just warp back to whatever my current home point is. Right now, I think my home point is the Aetheryte in Ul'dah. The home points are always going to be one of these Aetherytes like this, whichever one you set as your home point last. So you'll get warped right back there, and then you'll just have to go to the inconvenience of traveling back to wherever you wanted to be. It's not that bad, but it's also pretty hard to be just dying from basic enemies out and about in the world map. Unless you've gone to an area that's way too high level for you, most stuff's not going to be too nasty a threat. If you die inside of a dungeon, in most cases, you will either be revived by your healer, or you will get sent back to the start of the dungeon and just need to kind of run back to where you were previously. Status effects we've talked about already a little bit. You've seen some of the positive ones that can pop up there, like if I use this ability so I get 20% less damage for 20 seconds, you will see that positive status effect and the timer popping up there. Or usually on my interface, it'll pop up somewhere closer to down here above the action bars. Negative status effects would pop up as well if I got poisoned or something, and you would also see a timer for that. What else? Oh, yes, very important. Let's actually talk about Enmity. I've mentioned it a few times. Like when I turn on my tank stance, my Enmity is increased. What does that mean? It means that enemies are more angered when I use abilities to hurt them. Like normally, you don't have to have increased Enmity. Enemies will be pretty mad at you if you just hit them. I have the most enmity of all of my party members, which is 0, in this fight right now, because I'm the one doing damage to the boss. If I had somebody else here, let's say I pulled in QuaeFriend real fast, and QuaeFriend went in to get in some hits. If I just stop attacking for a bit and let QuaeFriend get in some jabs, eventually the Sabotender is going to get more mad at QuaeFriend, because QuaeFriend's the one doing additional damage. QuaeFriend will do enough damage to build up enough enmity with this enemy that the enemy will turn to face them unless they die first, which might happen, possibly. Wait, nope. Hey, look at that. QuaeFriend, you did it. You're tanking now. And it's dead. Here, let's pick a fight with another one real fast. So, I'll stop attacking. QuaeFriend, you get in there and do some hits. My tank stance isn't on, so I'm not really increasing enmity at all. And you can see, notice here, this little symbol next to the enemy's name went from a red square to a yellow triangle to a green circle. Now that it is a green circle, that means that, like, I am pretty far behind having top enmity on this enemy right now. QuaeFriend has way more enmity than I do, so that's why this enemy is going to be facing QuaeFriend instead. If I turn the tank stance on, though, and start using some abilities like maybe Shield Lob that increases enmity, I might get that enmity back real fast. One hit, boom, did it. Now it hates me again. which is good because I'm the tank and I've got all the armor and more HP than PlayFrame does. So that's kind of my role. On that note, let's talk about... Now, as I mentioned earlier on, there are 17 playable jobs in the game right now, all of which play quite differently from each other. They've got different abilities, they handle differently, they've all got their own learning curves, but they'll all be able to hold their own pretty well in a fight with a random enemy out in the world if they're just playing solo or just going through the main story and stuff like that. Once you get into a group situation, though, once you're going into a dungeon where you're forming a party to take on stronger enemies, all of those 17 jobs, different though they may be, are going to boil down to one of three roles: tanks, healers, or damage dealers. If you've played MMORPGs before, then that little trinity of job roles is going to be very, very familiar because it's how most of them work. Let's talk about them one by one. Tanks, which is what I am right now as a gladiator. Tanks are the people who take a beating so that others don't have to. We have higher HP than everybody else. We can wear the chonkiest armor with the best defense. We have a lot of abilities that are designed to keep enemies focused on us, like this tank stance, or this shield lob that increases enmity. We have abilities that reduce incoming damage, like this. And that's really our biggest responsibility. At the bare minimum, a tank should be making sure that enemies are hitting them and not anybody else in the group, because we've got the health to take it. But that's not our only responsibility, though. Like, if you can just do that, you'll be a decent enough tank, but there are other things that you can do that make you a good tank, including things like making sure that I am avoiding as much damage as possible. Because yes, I do want all the enemies to be focusing on me and attacking me, but if I can reduce the amount of damage I'm taking by whatever means necessary, then I'm going to live longer, and it's going to be way easier on the healer who's trying to keep me alive. So I need to be sure that when I've got all the enemies facing me, I am not ever standing in a danger puddle, so I'm not ever taking those big hits. I also should try to make sure that I can use these abilities that reduce damage as much as possible, just to reduce the amount of damage that I am taking to make the healer's life easier, and so that I just don't make stuff harder for everybody. Another helpful responsibility that I have, you remember that positionals thing that I talked about earlier with this whole ring here? My job as a tank, since the enemies are supposed to be focusing on me, is I am responsible for positioning the boss. Since they're attacking me, they're going to be following me around. They're going to be pointed in my direction. So I can make sure that if we want the boss to be standing somewhere specific, like maybe not in their poison puddle that would heal them, then it's my job to move them further away. It's also like my job to try to keep enemies standing still when I can, because that those directional attacks that I mentioned before, if I've got damage dealers in the party who are going to be able to do way more damage by hitting the enemy in the back, it's going to be a lot harder for them if I'm just dancing around all the time, having the boss like turn around to face me all the time, like where their back is moving constantly. The damage dealers will be very annoyed if I do that. They'll be way happier if I try to hold still and make sure that the enemy is facing one direction constantly, so they can just stand right behind the enemy and not have to worry about it. I do still have to move occasionally to get out of a danger puddle, but ideally I can do that, get out of the danger puddle and move right back and see like barely any rotation happened at all there. So that's something you can do to be a better tank. Another thing that you end up doing as a tank, another responsibility that just kind of ends up happening naturally, is that when you are the tank in a party going through a dungeon, you tend to be the one setting the pace. Because nobody else in the party is sturdy enough to wander off on their own. Enemies in dungeons are strong, and if anybody in the party tries to go up and solo fight an enemy in there, they're probably gonna die. So everybody, as a result, needs to kind of stick close to me and let me get in that first hit, so that I am building up enmity on that enemy, and the enemies want to face me, so that when they start coming in, when the damage dealers start dealing all of their damage with their really strong attacks, the enemies are focused on me already. And because of that, I tend to be the one setting the pace, getting around the dungeon. I choose how many enemies we end up pulling at once to fight. I choose the direction we're going. You kind of become the leader of the school bus for a little while. A lot of people are actually scared of playing the tank role for that reason. They have a term for it called tanxiety, because it just makes some people feel nervous having that sort of sense of responsibility for knowing where in the dungeon to go, knowing how many enemies it's safe to pull at once to where like the healers aren't going to get overwhelmed. knowing the mechanics of all the boss fights so that you know how to avoid as much damage as possible and stuff like that. You don't have to be an expert to play a tank. You really don't. But the more you know about every dungeon you're going into, the more familiar and comfortable you are with it, the better a tank you're going to be. Which I guess actually leads me to the next role of the three, another one that people sometimes feel scared to take on, the healer. The healer is responsible for keeping the party alive. They have access to a lot of spells that will restore HP or reduce the damage that our party members are taking, or if necessary, they have abilities for reviving fallen teammates. Hopefully it won't come to that, but it inevitably always does. And it's good to be able to get people back up on their feet and into the fight. Especially the tank. That's the healer's top priority, keeping the tank alive. Because the tank is the person who is probably taking the vast majority of the damage if things are going well. And if the tank dies, things get hairy real fast because all the enemies who were focusing on the tank and real mad at the tank then all turn around and ask who's next, which is the remaining surviving party members. And they're not nearly as sturdy. So if the tank goes down, that can get real bad real fast. So keeping the tank alive is top priority. Second priority, keeping all the damage dealers alive, if possible, because you want them still alive and doing as much damage as they can to end the fight as fast as possible. Tank is higher priority, but damage dealers, also important. Last priority, and this is where Final Fantasy XIV is a little bit different from other MMORPGs, healers are also responsible for doing damage themselves. They all have damage-dealing moves, and they need to be using them anytime they don't have a healing emergency to deal with. Because the more damage we're putting onto enemies, the faster they die, the less damage they can do to us. So healers cannot, or should not anyway, just be sitting around waiting for a health bar to be a little empty so that they can cast a heal spell again. When they have a moment, they should be casting damage spells and helping us all out. Everybody's a damage dealer in this game. Even the tank. I've got damage dealing abilities, and I need to be using them constantly. I may not be able to do quite as much damage as the damage dealing classes, but I can still do some, and I should. And actually, on that note, let's talk about damage dealers, the third role. There are a lot of damage-dealing jobs in Final Fantasy XIV, a lot of different flavors of them. Some of them are melee damage dealers who do all their damage by fighting enemies up close. There are some ranged ones, like the Bard, who fire bows and arrows and stuff. There's magical ranged ones who cast spells from a distance. But ultimately, all of them are responsible first and foremost for killing things fast. They have high damaging abilities, and they have to use them to kill enemies quickly. They're very good at it. They have other responsibilities too, though, like providing support. A lot of these damage-dealing jobs have abilities that benefit everybody. Maybe they increase all of our move speed, maybe they increase all of our damage for a set amount of time, or weaken enemies for a while, and it's important that they use those to help all of us out. They can also be responsible for helping out with a lot of different mechanics in boss fights. There are times where, damage dealers will need to go take out some smaller enemies or something while the tank tries to keep the big boss busy. But the last responsibility that damage dealers have, and it's one that all the classes have to do technically, but damage dealers especially, don't die like an idiot. Damage dealers do not have the healing abilities of the healer or the defensive capabilities of the tank. So it's really important to try to take as little damage as you can as a damage dealer. Don't stand in those danger puddles. Try to avoid getting hit by the mechanics in the boss fights, because the more the healers are having to try to keep you alive, the more stress you're putting on them, and the more grumpy they're probably eventually going to get at you. Now, I've definitely seen some people asking in the comments, can you play this game solo? Can you play this like a single-player game? And the answer is no, kind of. So, as you've seen, I've been playing solo for the vast majority of this game. And yes, I've been over leveled for content a lot of the time, but that's fine. You can go through the vast majority of the main story quest, 95% of it, entirely by yourself and be just fine. So in most of the time, you can play this game totally like a single player game. However, you can't solo dungeons or trials against primals or raids or any of those other things. Most raids are optional, but still, you can't, those cases are where you are going to need to join a party. Fortunately, the game gives you lots of handy tools for finding a group. But ideally, I would recommend playing with some friends because these games are just more fun that way, or finding a good free company to join so that anytime you have to do group content, you can just go down and chat and say, hey, I got to go do this dungeon. Anyone want to join? Because usually you'll be able to find a group pretty handily most of the time. But if you don't have a group or you just really don't want to play this, so if you want to play this game with as minimal socializing as possible, which I don't recommend, but you can totally do, anytime you have to get to a fight or go to a dungeon, you can pull up the duty finder. You can click on what dungeon you want to go to, and you can just click join, and the game will find other people who are wanting to do that particular thing and find a group for you and put you in one, and boom, you can just go do that dungeon with that group, and as soon as you're done, bam, you all go your separate ways. It's very convenient. And yes, occasionally you will find that you are paired with some people who are either not very good, which happens, we're all learning, or you'll find occasionally some people who are rude, and that always sucks. I have found that 14 tends to have a much lower percentage of rude jerk people than other MMOs I've played. They do exist. I'm not going to say you won't run into them, but on the whole, like 14's community tends to be pretty like helpful and forgiving and nice and understanding, which I've really appreciated. I guess the fact that we all do sometimes have to rely on other players to progress further in the game just means we kind of get used to wanting to be a good party member. Another question that I'll sometimes see people ask is, like, are some jobs better than others? Like, which one should I play? Fortunately for you, you should play whichever the heck one you want to. Whichever one wears the coolest clothes or has the weapon you like. Because they're all 100% viable. They're all quite well balanced. Honestly, like, if you are one of the best players of this game in the world, you might be skilled enough to where you can figure out how to make one of the tank jobs like 2 or 3% more effective or efficient in many situations than the other ones. The vast majority of us are not nearly that good at the game, though, and are not going to notice any difference whatsoever. So you play what you like. Every single job in the game is viable. They all are fun in their own way. As you play and experiment with other jobs, you will find certain ones click with you and some don't. And that's okay. It's fun kind of finding your job over time as you experiment. It's fun. That's one thing I really love about 14 in general, the ability to switch jobs and switch combat roles without having to create a new character, without losing progress in the story or unlocked features or anything else. I can just decide, you know what? Boom, I'm going to switch to a white mage and play that for a while, see how I like it. And then maybe I decide, I don't know if white mage is for me. Let's try one of the other healers. Maybe I try a different healer, like Scholar or something, and I'm like, ooh, this is quite good, actually. I like how this one works. Like, that can be quite fun, and I love that you have the ability to just switch jobs pretty much whenever you want to. Which actually brings me to the next thing I want to talk about. Let's talk about how does progression work in this game. As you can see right now, I am a level 29 gladiator, going on 30. Closer to 30 now because of the random things I've been fighting than I was when I started the video, but not quite 30 yet. If I did go and switch to White Mage right now, walked into Gridania, into the Conjurer's Guild, and asked to become a White Mage, I would become a level 1 White Mage. I would not still be level 29. You level these jobs independently in this game. Now, that does not mean that you lose all the other forms of progress you've been making, all these Aetherites I've been attuning to, all the features I've unlocked, like access to the gold saucer, access to a chocobo who will fight with me, the ability to ride airships, like all that stuff still stays the same. My combat level just goes down for that particular job. So you might be asking, all right, well, if it doesn't like take away access to features, then like what does job level ultimately do for you? Well, it does several things. For one, it gets you access to new abilities and skills. We learned Fast Blade as a level 1 gladiator, but Riot Blade we didn't have access to until we got to level 4. The further we get into a job, the more levels we get, the more abilities we will get access to. So that's one of the big things that changes. The other thing that changes is the gear you have access to. You can see right here, if I highlight the tooltip for the shield, if you look a little further down underneath the item level 21 and underneath the gladiator paladin thing designating which jobs can use this weapon, shield, you know what I mean, you see level 21. I have to be a level 21 gladiator or paladin to equip this shield. Before this, the shields I would have had access to would have not been as good. Their block strength would have been less. They wouldn't have provided as nice bonuses. As I get higher and higher level, I will get access to gear with even better defense, even better stat boosts. So the higher level you are, the better gear you can equip, and often the cooler looking, fancier gear you can equip. Higher level will also give you access to more quests and content in the game. Remember in the very first episode when I was just going through the main story quest and I reached a point where I had to stop and go kill some things for a minute because the next main story quest required me to be level 4 and I wasn't yet? That's how quests can work in this game. Like if you are not sufficient level to do the quest, you can't do it. And some quests will only appear once you reach a certain level with a certain job. Like there's a lot of optional dungeons, for example, out in the game that you will unlock them by doing a quest, one of those like blue plus mark quest symbols out in the world. And those won't appear until I reach like level 15 or 20 or 30 or whatever with some job. They won't even be visible to me. Even other features can be the same way. Like remember the esthetician, the haircut guy? I didn't have access to that quest to unlock that feature until I got a job to level 15. So that is another way that leveling your job up benefits you. Now, you will recall, as we've been playing through the main story, that there are many times where I will get into a fight for a quest or go into a dungeon, and I will mention that my level has been scaled down. What does that mean? Basically, it means that temporarily, for as long as you are in that dungeon or doing that series of fights, your level will be scaled down to whatever the level of that fight is or that dungeon is. So, for example, if we were to go into Sestasha again, I'm a level 29 gladiator right now, but the cap for Sestasha is 18. It would sink my level down to level 18 if I entered Sestasha. What would that mean? Well, it would basically squish my stats down to make me closer to what I would have been at level 18 on this job. Not exactly the same, like I'm wearing gear that is better than what a level 18 character can wear, and that's going to give me some boosts and bonuses that will still apply even with the scaled down level. So I'll still be more effective than I would have been just as a first timer level 18 going and fighting that dungeon, but it will squash those stats a good bit so that the dungeon content is still like that. I'm still kind of like an even match for it. So it's actually a challenge and I don't just barge through killing everything in one hit. Having your level scaled down will also temporarily lose you access to abilities that are beyond that level. So, for example, what's a higher level skill here? Okay, none of these are useful. But okay, this one's level 26. If I went into Sestasha and got scaled down to level 18, this ability requires level 26, so I would temporarily lose access to this skill. That's another thing that having your level scaled down will do. So basically, anytime you see me go into a dungeon, or see me go into a boss fight with a primal, or even just go into a fight sequence that's part of the main story, and you see that little pop-up there saying you're about to enter a duty, my level is probably going to be scaled down to match that content so that it's actually a little bit of a challenge. Maybe not much of a challenge, but a little bit of one. Now, we've talked about a lot of different things here, and I've rambled for a long time. Sorry about that. Let's just go ahead and answer the real core question. Let's finally answer, now that you know all of this other stuff. So now you have a lot of information. It's probably not going to be too hard to follow generally what I'm doing when I'm fighting enemies by myself just out in the world. I'm using various abilities to do damage and kill them, and it's pretty straightforward. Once we get into dungeons, though, if you're wanting to be able to more easily follow what's happening, this is my advice. First of all, don't really worry about what abilities me and my party members are using. There are dozens and dozens, hundreds of them in the game. They all have their own fancy, flashy effects and tons of different things they do. Even for me, like, I'm not actively parsing what skill everyone's using at any given time. Don't worry so much about that. Instead, watch the boss's behavior, because that'll tell you a little bit more. Like, watch their animations and their attacks. Like, who are they targeting currently? Are they targeting the tank or somebody else? Are they casting something right now? Note the varieties of danger puddles they're throwing around and how me and the rest of the party react to it. Also, watch everybody's HP. That'll really tell you kind of everything. How much HP does the boss have left? how's the party's health looking? When you look up in the top left corner, like, are their HP bars all relatively full? Is there anybody dead? If some people are down, then that could mean that things are going pretty bad, especially is the healer down? Uh-oh, that's very bad. Like, things like that will tell you way more about how a fight is going than trying to parse the actual abilities happening. Watch the boss and the abilities they're throwing out so you can get a sense for the mechanics, and I'll be trying to talk about those mechanics as we play so that you can kind of know what the boss is doing a little easier. But then also just kind of like watch how everybody in the party is reacting to those mechanics and watch the HP bars. If you just do that, you will be able to way easier follow what is happening. That's what I'm doing in a fight. I'm watching what the boss is doing. I'm trying to remember to use like my abilities correctly, but I'm really watching for danger puddles to make sure that I avoid the big attacks, and I'm keeping an eye on everybody's HP and the boss's HP to see how we're doing, how close the boss is to dead, see if we're hanging in there and all that. That's pretty much the advice I'd give if you're wanting to be able to understand what's happening in those big boss fights better. But that was a lot of stuff. I rambled for a long time. Sorry about that. I hope that this has been helpful, though. I hope that it's given a little more of an understanding of the basics and what's going on and how the HUD works and all that other stuff. I hope this has helped. Later on, if you're interested in knowing what more of the jobs are and what they do and what makes them distinct and different, what some of their abilities are, I'm thinking of doing some other videos a little later on, just kind of walking through some of those and giving a little crash course quick taster, just so you kind of have a bit more familiarity. But yeah, for now, I have rambled way too long. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this is helpful, and I will see you tomorrow for some more story. Do take care of yourselves, and I will see you later. Goodbye.